Michael had spent 22 years greeting children with the same warm phrase, "Morning, buddy, God bless your day." But on the day everything fell apart, silence swallowed the words he had spoken thousands of times. One crash, one moment of shattered glass, one breath taken in fear, and suddenly the man who once filled the bus with gentle encouragement could no longer speak a single word. Doctors called it trauma-induced aphonia. Michael called it losing the anchor of who I am. He tried to pray that night, but even alone in his small living room, nothing came out, not even a whisper. It felt as if God himself had gone quiet. And yet, the next morning, when he returned to the bus depot to gather his belongings, he found something tucked under his seat. A child's drawing. A stick-figure version of him standing beside a bright yellow bus with a single sentence written in crooked letters, "Mr. Michael, God uses you to make us feel safe." He stared at the page, trembling. Why had he not seen it before? Why now? On the day his voice died, the depot air was still, his hands shook, and somewhere inside that heaviness, a small, almost unnoticed warmth stirred, as if God had slipped a message into the ruins of his darkest moment, a message Michael was not ready for, but deeply needed, because sometimes God hides his purpose in the very thing that feels like an ending. Michael's town was small enough that everyone knew the sound of his bus before they ever saw its headlights turning the corner. For years, parents trusted him not only to drive their children safely, but to remind them every single morning that kindness still mattered. It wasn't just a job, it was a rhythm of care, a quiet ministry hidden inside everyday routine. But now the depot felt like a place he no longer belonged to. Men he'd worked with for decades greeted him with hesitant glances, unsure whether to ask about the accident or the long band of bruises still fading along his neck. Michael forced a polite nod, pretending their sympathy didn't feel like pity. He used to fill silences with light conversation, stories from the road, or small prayers whispered before the route began. Now, silence followed him like a shadow he couldn't outrun. His house, once warmed by soft radio hymns in the morning, felt colder than usual. He tried turning the radio on again, but without his voice to accompany the music, it all felt wrong. So he turned it back off and wandered aimlessly from room to room, touching objects as if they might offer answers. The jacket he wore every winter, the coffee mug gifted by a student, the framed photo of his parents on their old farm. His faith hadn't disappeared, but it felt distant, like a shoreline blurred by fog. He still trusted God, but pain has a way of muting even the strongest trust. That night, he took out the child's drawing again. He held it with the care one reserves for fragile things. The little sentence, "God uses you to make us feel safe," echoed louder than anything he could say with his damaged voice. He wondered which child had drawn it. He wondered why it had been left under the seat for him to find now, when he felt stripped of purpose, coincidence. He had seen enough in life to know better, but he couldn't shake the fear that maybe his purpose had been tied to a voice he no longer had. How does a man serve God when the tool he used for so long has been taken away? The following morning, Michael forced himself out of bed. He walked into town, partly to clear his mind, partly because staying still made the weight inside him grow heavier. As he passed the bakery, the owner, Mrs. Harris, waved him in. She handed him a warm roll, free of charge, just as she had done countless times. But today she didn't chatter. She simply put a hand on his arm, eyes soft with compassion. Her silence didn't feel awkward. It felt intentional. Down the street, another parent stopped him, expressing gratitude for all the years he had cared for their daughter. Their words flowed like gentle streams, filling the spaces that his own voice could no longer reach. Michael felt something shift inside, small, subtle, but unmistakably real. Then, As he sat on a bench in the park, flipping the child's drawing between his fingers, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. On the back, faint pencil marks. A second line, almost erased, as if the child had changed their mind mid-sentence. God sees you even when you feel invisible. He stared at it, heart thudding. Invisible. That was exactly how he felt. It was as if God had allowed this tiny message to surface only when Michael was finally still enough to notice it. The wind stirred the trees overhead. Children played in the distance, and for the first time since the accident, he closed his eyes and simply breathed, letting the quiet become a place where God could whisper. He wasn't healed. He wasn't sure, but something was beginning, a thread of purpose, faint but present, tugging him gently forward, toward a story he hadn't yet imagined, hidden inside the very moment he thought had ended everything. 3 days after the accident, Michael received a letter from the school district. He knew what it was before he opened it. The weight of the envelope said enough. His trembling hands tore it open. With concern for student safety, temporary removal from duty, pending full medical clearance, reassignment under evaluation. Reassignment. A quiet word that felt like a verdict. He wasn't fired, but he was stripped of the route that had shaped his life for more than 2 decades. The familiar faces, the morning greetings, the sense of purpose that came with guiding children safely through their day. Suddenly, all of it had been put in someone else's hands. Michael walked to the depot to speak with the supervisor, hoping maybe there had been a mistake, or at least some room for understanding. But the moment he entered the break area, conversation died. A few drivers gave him sympathetic half-smiles, but others whispered behind their coffee mugs, "He can't drive like that. What if he freezes again? They need someone reliable. Poor guy, but it's better this way." He heard every word, each one carving deeper into the place where his confidence used to live. The supervisor, Mr. Nolan, tried to sound reassuring, but the tone felt rehearsed. "It's not permanent, Michael. We just need to be cautious. Parents talk, they worry, and, well, the silence makes them uneasy." The silence. The thing he couldn't control had become the reason they doubted him. When he walked back outside, a few parents waiting near the school fence recognized him. One asked gently, "How are you feeling?" Another added, "We heard you won't be driving for a while. Is that true?" Their faces were kind, but nearby, 2 others whispered to each other, glancing at him with that mixture of curiosity and judgment that always stings worse than anger. He forced a nod, holding the child's drawing inside his jacket like a secret lifeline. As he walked away, he saw the new driver stepping onto his bus, a younger man with a bright voice who greeted the children with cheerful confidence. The kids responded eagerly, laughing as they climbed the steps. Michael felt both happy for them and painfully aware of how quickly a familiar space can forget the one who once filled it. That afternoon, during a town meeting at the community hall, someone publicly questioned the district's decision to keep an unstable driver employed, emphasizing that his silence was unsettling for children. The words weren't meant to be cruel, but they cut through him all the same. He wasn't unstable, he was wounded, and in his wounds he feared being misunderstood more than anything. Walking home in the fading light, he felt smaller with each step. Every street corner he passed seemed to echo what he had lost, not just his voice, but his identity, his place, the rhythm of mornings he cherished. He reached his house, sank into a chair, and placed the child's drawing on the table. For the first time, the small message felt almost impossible to believe. He bowed his head, not praying yet, just breathing through the ache. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. The weight of public judgment had pressed him into a darkness he didn't know how to navigate. But somewhere, beneath the noise, a quiet truth waited. Something God had begun whispering long before Michael realized he needed to hear it, and that whisper was about to grow louder. The next morning, Michael woke before the sun. He hadn't slept well. His mind kept replaying the words spoken at the town meeting, each one tightening the ache in his chest. He stepped outside, letting the cool air settle on his face. The sky was still dim, the first hints of dawn brushing the horizon with soft grey. For a long moment, he simply stood there, listening to the stillness. No buses rumbling, no morning chatter, just silence, the very thing he had begun to fear. Yet today, the silence felt different, not accusing, not suffocating. It felt like an invitation. He walked slowly toward the small public garden at the end of the street, the place he used to pass every morning before his route. As he reached the bench under the old oak tree, memories surfaced, him whispering short prayers before starting the day, asking God to protect each child he escorted. Those prayers had been simple, genuine, steady. Sitting down, he closed his eyes. He still couldn't speak, but the prayer within him rose naturally, almost effortlessly, not loud, not desperate, just honest. Lord, guide me, help me see what you're doing, even in this silence. The moment he finished the prayer, a gentle peace settled over him. Not a full understanding, but a soft reassurance, like God laying a hand on his shoulder. Not everything was clear, but something in him felt steadier. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the child's drawing again. It had become more than paper. It was becoming a mirror, showing him pieces of himself he had forgotten. On the front, the child had drawn him smiling, not because of his voice, not because of what he did, but because of who he was to them. The realization pressed on him tenderly. Maybe God wasn't removing his purpose. Maybe he was reshaping it. As Michael walked home, he passed by the schoolyard. Children played freely, their laughter filling the air. One girl looked up and waved at him with innocent joy. She had been on his route for years. Her small gesture felt like a whisper straight from God. "You are still seen." Near the entrance, the principal spotted him and offered a quiet smile, one without pity, only respect. That simple acknowledgement felt like a spark of dignity returning. Michael paused, placing his hand on his chest, thanking God silently. He wasn't sure what was coming, but he felt the first hints of a path forming beneath his feet, a path not dependent on a voice, but on a heart willing to be used. He walked away from the schoolyard, feeling lighter, unaware that he was standing at the threshold of a turn he couldn't yet imagine, one God had been preparing long before the accident. Before Michael's story moved any further, one truth was becoming clear. The moment he thought would end, everything was quietly becoming the doorway to something he never expected. And if you're watching this now, don't miss this part. Sometimes the very place where you feel silenced, overlooked, or pushed aside, becomes the place where God prepares your next chapter. Not by restoring what you lost, but by revealing what you never knew was inside you. Michael was about to discover that the accident didn't remove his purpose. It placed him exactly where God needed him to see what he had been blind to for years. So stay with me, because the next moment, the moment when God begins to turn everything, is the one most people miss. Ready? Then let's go to the part where the first blessing arrives. Quiet, unexpected, and powerful. 2 days later, Michael received a message from the school counselor, Mrs. Avery. She asked if he could stop by the school, not for a meeting with administrators, not for an evaluation, but to help with something important. The wording caught his curiosity. He almost didn't go, worried it might be another conversation about his limitations, but something gentle nudged him forward. When he arrived, the halls were quieter than usual. Classes were in session, sunlight pooling across the floors in long, warm stripes. Mrs. Avery greeted him with a smile that felt sincere, not strained. She motioned for him to follow her to a small room near the guidance office. Inside were 3 students, 2 boys and a girl, each staring at the floor, fidgeting with their hands. They had all been on his bus for years. Mrs. Avery explained softly that these 3 had been struggling since the accident. Their routines, their sense of safety, even their behavior in class had shifted. She said they had asked about Michael every day, wondering if he was okay, wondering why everything suddenly felt different. They didn't want to talk to anyone else, she continued. Only you. Michael felt something stir inside him, a warmth he hadn't felt since before the accident. Without needing words, he stepped forward and sat with them. The children looked up, their anxious expressions softening the moment their eyes met his. The girl, Emma, held out a notebook timidly. Inside was page after page of small messages written in uneven handwriting. Hope you're okay. We miss you. You made mornings feel safe. Tears filled his eyes, but he kept them steady. He placed a hand over his heart, then over the notebook, communicating gratitude without needing a single sound. The children understood instantly. One of the boys whispered, "We don't need you to talk, Mr. Michael. We just need you to be here." That sentence hit him like a beam of light breaking through heavy clouds. Just be here. Not perfect, not fully healed, just present. For the first time since losing his voice, he felt purpose rise. Not forced, not imagined, but real. A blessing he didn't see coming. Mrs. Avery gently suggested something new. What if you came by once or twice a week to check in with kids who need encouragement, just a few minutes at a time? You don't need your voice. You've always spoken with more than words. Michael hesitated, not because he doubted her, but because he felt something holy in what she was offering. A door quietly opening, one God had crafted from the very pieces of his brokenness. He nodded slowly. The children smiled with relief, and Michael felt a deep sense of worship rise within him, not through song or speech, but through gratitude. Inside, he whispered a silent praise. Thank you, God. I thought I had been set aside, but you were setting something new in motion. As he walked out of the school, the world looked different. The heaviness hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted, making room for hope, for purpose, for a future shaped not by his voice, but by God's guidance. He didn't know it yet, but this small invitation was about to lead him into a second trial, one that would test him deeper and reveal even more of God's hidden message. For a week, Michael visited the school in short, gentle intervals. He met with children who struggled, who felt anxious, who needed someone steady in their corner. And somehow, despite his silence, he became a calming presence. The teachers noticed, the parents noticed, even the principal began commenting on the unexpected effect he had on the more withdrawn students. It felt like God had taken the broken pieces of his identity and reshaped them into something quietly powerful. But just when hope began to steady him, the second trial arrived, one he never saw coming. It began with a rumor. One afternoon, as he left the guidance office, he noticed 2 teachers whispering. They weren't being cruel, just concerned. He caught fragments. But he's not trained for counseling. What if a child depends on him too much? We could get in trouble. Michael walked past them, pretending he hadn't heard, but the words clung to him, reopening doubts he thought he had buried. By the time he reached the hallway, the principal approached him with an apologetic expression. "Michael, we need to talk." They stepped into an empty classroom. The room was warm, sunlight filling the corners, yet the atmosphere felt cold. The principal explained that some staff members had expressed discomfort about an unofficial volunteer without formal training, spending time with vulnerable students. It wasn't a reprimand, just a cautious conversation, but the tone felt like another door closing. "People mean well," the principal added gently, "but they worry." They wonder if you're stepping into responsibilities that could put you in a difficult position. He didn't accuse. He didn't judge. But Michael felt the familiar weight return, the sense of being misunderstood, displaced, and gently pushed away from a role he loved. He tried to signal that he wasn't counseling anyone, just offering presence, comfort, hope. But without his voice, his explanation felt thin, fragile. The principal sighed, clearly conflicted. "For now," he said slowly, "it may be best to pause your visits until we figure out a way to make this official and safe for everyone." Pause. That word felt heavier than silence. Michael nodded, masking the sting by placing a hand over his chest in a gesture of understanding. The principal gave him a look of genuine respect, but respect couldn't soften the blow. As he walked through the halls for what might be the last time, he passed a group of students. Emma saw him first. Her smile faded when she noticed his somber expression. She ran to him, holding the edge of her notebook. "You're not leaving again, right?" she asked, voice trembling. He froze. He wanted to tell her no. He wanted to reassure her that everything was fine. But the truth sat heavy on him, and he could only lower himself to her height, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. His silence gave the answer she feared. Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to talk to help us," she whispered. He swallowed hard. Walking home afterward felt like wading through deep water. With every step, questions rose inside him. Why would God open a door only to let it close again? Why let the blessing bloom just long enough to feel real, then take it out of his hands? That night, as he sat in his living room, the child's drawing on the table again, he felt the ache press deeper than before. Not because of judgment from others, but because he feared losing the one thing that had begun to heal him. What he didn't know, what he couldn't yet see, was that this second trial wasn't the end. It was the turn that would reveal the true message God had been hiding inside his darkest moment, a message bigger than his voice, his role, or even his pain, a message about purpose he had never imagined. The next morning, Michael woke with a heaviness that felt different, not sharp like the first days after the accident, but deep, slow, and aching. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the child's drawing as if it were the last fragile piece of hope he had left. He needed air, he needed clarity, he needed God to speak in a way he could understand. So he walked toward the park, the same place where he had first discovered the faint pencil message on the back of the drawing. The sky was overcast, the air cool, families passed by, children playing, life moving forward without asking for permission. He sat on the familiar bench beneath the oak tree and let his shoulders fall. "God, I don't understand," he whispered in his heart. And then, naturally, almost like breath, a second prayer rose. "Father, lead me. Show me what this silence is shaping inside me." The wind rustled the leaves above him, soft and steady. And then something unexpected happened. A boy from his old bus route, Ethan, the quiet one who rarely spoke, approached him shyly. He held something in his hands, a small binder, worn, decorated with stickers. Without a word, he offered it to Michael. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all from students. Some were drawings, some were short sentences. Some were long paragraphs written with trembling handwriting. "When you rode with us, I wasn't scared of the world. Your smile helped me not cry in the mornings. You made me feel safe when home didn't. Thank you for being the first person who believed in me." Page after page, story after story, child after child. Michael's vision blurred as he turned each page. His silence, for the first time, didn't feel like loss. It felt like space where God was speaking through the voices of the children he had served for years without realizing the depth of his impact. Ethan tugged on his sleeve and pointed behind them. When Michael turned, he saw Mrs. Avery, the principal, and a small group of teachers approaching, not with caution this time, but with humility. The principal stepped forward. "We were wrong," he said gently. "These children, they don't need your voice. They need your presence. We all misjudged what God was doing through you," Mrs. Avery added. "We want to create an official role for you, something real, something recognized, a position for emotional support and student connection. You don't need training to be who you already are." Michael's breath caught, a role rooted not in what he lost, but in what had always been inside him. He pressed a hand to his chest, overwhelmed. He lifted his eyes toward the sky, grey but peaceful, and inside he whispered a quiet worship. "Thank you, God. You were guiding me even in the silence." At that moment, everything aligned. The accident, the drawing, the children, the second trial. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't random. It was direction. God hadn't abandoned him. God had been leading him, one quiet layer at a time, to the purpose he was always meant to walk into. And now, it stood right in front of him. The following week felt like stepping into a life Michael never imagined, but one that had been quietly forming long before he noticed its shape. The school board approved the new role, naming it Student Support Liaison, a title far more formal than the heart behind it. But the purpose was simple, to be present for the children who needed a steady, compassionate figure in their day. When Michael walked back into the school for the first time in his new position, the reaction was immediate. Children rushed to greet him, some waving, some holding up drawings, some simply smiling with a relief too sincere to hide. Teachers welcomed him with warmth, not caution. Even the principal, usually composed, looked deeply moved as he shook Michael's hand. It wasn't just a return, it was a restoration, not of his old life, but of something truer, deeper, more aligned with who God had always seen him to be. He began meeting with students in short sessions, listening with his eyes, encouraging with gestures, offering silent reassurance that somehow spoke louder than words. Some children talked freely, others simply sat with him in quiet companionship. In every moment, he felt God's presence guiding him, steadying him, using his silence as a tool rather than a limitation. One afternoon, Emma entered the room with her notebook pressed to her chest. She didn't sit. She ran straight to him and wrapped her arms around him. Michael held her gently, eyes soft. "We prayed you'd come back," she whispered. "God listened." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words sink deep. Inside, gratitude rose like a warm tide. "Thank you, God," he whispered silently, for giving back more than what was taken. Later, as he walked through the courtyard, sunlight streaming across the ground, he paused near the oak tree visible through the fence, the place where everything had shifted. He breathed in deeply, feeling the peace of a man who had finally seen the pattern behind his pain. His silence was no longer a wound, it was a language, a ministry, a purpose reborn. And in the quiet of his heart, worship flowed, gentle, grateful, honest. He had lost his voice, but God had given him his calling, and that calling was changing lives, including his own. Months passed, and Michael's presence became a quiet pillar in the school community. He no longer blended into the background of routine. He had become a place of calm, a reminder to students and teachers alike that kindness didn't need volume to be heard. Parents began sending notes of thanks. Teachers asked for his help with students who struggled. Even children who weren't on his old bus route sought him out just to sit near him for a few minutes before class. His silence had become something sacred, an anchor in a noisy world. One afternoon, the school hosted an assembly on resilience. Near the end, the principal stepped onto the stage and shared Michael's journey, not in dramatic detail, but with a reverence that honored the quiet transformation they had witnessed. He pointed toward Michael, seated at the side of the gym. "Sometimes God speaks loudest through the ones who can't," he said gently. "Michael taught us that presence can be as healing as words." The students applauded, not out of pity, but out of recognition. They knew what he had meant to them long before the adults understood it. Michael felt warmth rise in his chest, and though he couldn't speak, he lifted his hand in humble acknowledgement. In his heart, a soft expression of adoration formed. "God, you are faithful, even in silence. You speak life." After the assembly, Ethan approached him with a small wooden plaque the students had made. It read, "Your silence made us feel heard." Michael ran his fingers over the carved letters, deeply moved. This simple line felt like the legacy he never expected to leave. He smiled, eyes gentle, knowing now that the accident hadn't ended his story. It had redirected it, and through every turn, God had been quietly shaping a purpose greater than the one he'd clung to before, a purpose that would outlive him in the hearts of the children he loved. In the end, Michael's journey revealed something many forget in their darkest moments. God does not waste pain, silence, or loss. When life strips away what we thought defined us, God gently uncovers what truly does. Sometimes the path to purpose is carved through moments we never wanted, but needed to become who we were meant to be. Michael learned that the voice God uses most is not always the one we speak with, but the one we live with. His silence became a testimony, a reminder that God works in ways quieter and deeper than we often notice. And the message hidden in his hardest moment was simple, steady, and life-changing. When God takes something, he is never subtracting. He is preparing to multiply. Everything had a purpose. If this story touched your heart today, let it be a reminder. God is working in your life, even in the moments that feel silent, confusing, or broken. Just like Michael, you are being shaped, guided, and prepared for something greater than what was taken from you. Before you go, take a moment to breathe and thank God for the hidden purposes he's unfolding in your journey. You are not alone. You are seen, and your story is still being written by the one who never fails. If this message blessed your life, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and share your heart with us in the comments. Tell us your city and country. We want to know where this story reached you. Your engagement helps this message of hope reach more people who need it. Stay blessed.